That's valuable. At NATE, we honor and acknowledge that the land on which we work, we learn, and we live is Treaty 6 territory. This place is a traditional homeland for the First Nations and Métis peoples, and today we are all part of this treaty land. The traditional name for this place is the Musquatchie Waskigan, which we also call the city of Edmonton. Guys, I'm very happy to introduce you to Craig, and I'm so glad now, Craig, that you can come to campus with the turnout that I have right now. I'd be really, really embarrassed. But Craig is one of our valuable mentors and has been working with our students for a couple of years now. And he is a lawyer running his own firm, CKS Legal, and he's an expert in this area. So we're very lucky to have him. I'm going to pass it over to Craig. I'm going to put myself on mute. Please feel free to put questions in the chat, and then when we're done the session, unmute and ask questions as well.
Sounds good. Thank you. A couple of housekeeping tidbits first. My dog might appear behind me. It's one of the joys of being a sole practitioner is that you get to declare your support animal to be a St. Bernard. And so either A, you might see the St. Bernard appear in the camera behind me, or more likely B, hear the St. Bernard snoring during the presentation. So don't take that as permission for anybody to fall asleep. Next, we got a small crowd. So if you've got questions, I'm happy to take the discussion of the presentation off in whatever direction it has. Feel free to either raise your hand or put it in the chat, and I will hopefully notice it and we can move from there. So as was stated, my name is Craig Sherburne. I've got a ton of letters after my name just for, and this isn't bragging, but it'll be relevant later. I'm about 3 months away from getting more letters. I'm 3 months away from my MBA. So I will be ranging this into a discussion of some more heady business topics, but I also think that it's really relevant to this big question about what do I need to do to get investor ready. Before we can answer the question of what does investor ready mean, I want to start with what is a business, and then we're going to move into, well, what is value and how do you value a business, because that's all relevant to the things that you need to do to actually be ready for investors. I have a wide variety of business experience. I was in venture capital for years, investment banks, opened up a number of different companies myself over the years as an entrepreneur, some of them more successful than others, ranging from LED lighting, which did okay, into software, which is doing ragingly good. I'm part of a team that's doing enterprise level software for organizations across North America. And I got to tell you, if you can get into a business where your costs, your margins are above 97%, that's a good business to get into. Much better than having to buy and import is to just hire a team to create anew. Okay, so we're here to talk about getting investor ready. And the start of that is the purchase and sale of a business. Okay, and yes, okay, the purchase and sale of business. And the sale of a business has many of the same elements between somebody buying your business and somebody buying into your business. And when an investor comes along and says that they want to provide you funds, they're essentially buying into your business. There is no difference between the two things. The difference, though, is who will be doing the buying. Many times with your initial financing and investment of your business, it's going to come from friends and family. Your uncle that you see at Thanksgiving, he's the one that's going to be coming in and doing that early stage investment. And they treat investment in a business very different than arm's length third parties, the stranger. And so it can be quite a shock for entrepreneurs when they first interact with their first arm's length investors. They can be surprised by some of the questions they get. And it can be a shock when they're asked many times for the first time. Such shocking questions as, what assets does your business have? Or what do you need to actually operate your business? Or such a crazy question as, who are your customers? And this can sometimes be the first time that businesses get asked this question, is when they actually reach out and start looking for people to invest in their company. That is not the time to be wondering and thinking on your feet of who your customer is. But that's okay. The Mauji Center does a pretty darn good job of making sure that you're answering that question before you ever look for investors. Now, before we start on what it is to be investor ready, we want to talk about what is a business. And the MBA in me would want to describe a business as anything that transforms products, times, or services into an output that a third party is willing to purchase. Well, that nerdy little tidbit doesn't do us much good. Let me instead refer back to the sage advice of a gentleman called Adam Savage, who did a show in 2013 called Mythbusters. And in Mythbusters, he said, the only difference between science and screwing around is writing it down. And I heard that and I went, wow, that's really wise. And the next day, completely by coincidence and having nothing to do with that statement, I came up with the following. The difference between a hobby that makes money and a business is policies, processes, and controls. Sometimes I call it policies, procedures, and controls. Trust me, there are plenty of hobbies that make money out there. I've been doing this for close to 25 years now. I would go so far as to say most small enterprises with less than 50 employees are, notwithstanding their success, notwithstanding their profitability, most of them are still hobbies that make money. There will come a point for every business as it expands that it's got to become a business, not just a hobby that makes money. It has to put in policies, it has to put in procedures, it has to implement controls. And this usually arises upon the first injection of capital from an arm's length third party into that enterprise. Because it's not an uncle giving you money on the basis that it's you and he believes in you. It's actually, for example, a bank or a venture capital company that is coming in that doesn't care if you live or die. They just want to make profit. And the way that they're going to make profit is by making sure that your business is profitable. And the best way to make sure that a business is profitable is to make sure it's a business. And that is because you can sell a business. It is really hard to sell a hobby that makes money. Now, everybody in here is like, well, why can't I sell a hobby that makes money? So I'm going to use one of my patented, although it's not patented, maybe I should patent it, silly examples. So here's my silly example for the day, and it's called Bob's Truffles. So your name is Bob. You wake up one day and you discover you have a superpower. Instead of flight or turning invisible or super strength, you discover that your superpower is that you can smell truffles from 100 meters away. You beat the world's greatest truffle pigs hands down easily. So what do you do with this? You decide to create a side hustle where you're going out truffle hunting in the greater Edmonton region, and you find out that there's chefs that are willing to buy these truffles. And the side hustle gets more and more customers, and eventually you create Bob's Truffles. And we're going to pretend here that you're making $150,000 a year. And that's doing pretty good, but you're also getting tired of going truffle hunting every night. So you've decided that you want to sell your truffle supply business and retire to a nice warm beach of Mexico. And so you come to me and you go, how much is my business worth? Now, before we talk about why Bob can't sell this hobby that makes money, let's talk about what businesses are worth, because that's always what everybody wants to know. There are 4 ways to value an asset, and that includes businesses. You can value an asset or a business on the cost of its inputs. You can value it on the component value to the buyer or seller. What did it cost them to put this asset together? There's a fair market value that a third party would pay for the asset. That's the 3rd way. And the 4th is the value that a purchaser ascribes to that asset. Certain property might carry sentimental or emotional elements, which would vary from buyer to buyer. The last Christmas card from my aunt who passed away earlier this year has more value to me than it would be to somebody who never met my aunt. Likewise, if I had somebody's last Christmas card from their aunt, it would have more value to them than it would to me. Now, with a business, when you're talking about a business as an asset, you oftentimes refer to a business the business of value as a multiple of the projected annual profits. And you'll see this as a 3x, or I sold my company for 5x, or I sold my company for 0.1x. This is a value multiplier. It's a shorthand that people use in the industry. In the end, that shorthand really comes down to what the value of a purchaser would see in your business. If your business has a profit of $10,000 and they feel that that profit is realizable over 3 years, then they might ascribe a value to your business of $30,000, giving you a 3x. Over the years, I've seen ranges on multipliers range from 0.3 times all the way up to 9 times profit. And really that multiplier is based upon the certainty of a purchaser to realize that profit year over year. The construction industry, you're closer to 0.3x. A construction company doesn't have recurring revenue. They're only as good as their last project. The highest I've ever seen was actually in commercial cleaning about 10 years ago. Commercial cleaning were going anywhere between 5 to 9 times profits. And that was because commercial cleaning contracts didn't flip very often, and they were for long terms. If you ever wonder why you, when you purchase garbage removal services, that they lock you into 5-year contracts, or if you're buying IT services, why they want you to have 3 to 5 year contracts with automatic renewals, that's because they want to be able to sell their company in the future. And so they want to point to a purchaser and go, we have a reasonable expectation that whatever our current revenues or profits are, it'll be in the future. That's neither here nor there. Let's go on a practical example of the 4 ways to value an asset. Submarine sandwich. So you're making a submarine sandwich and you use $3.75 worth of bread and cheese. It takes 5 minutes for somebody who's paid $24 an hour to put that together. So you can calculate the value on the input cost is simply $5.75. Component value, well, that's the same as the input cost. And it depends on whether they're whether somebody's self-performing the making of the sandwich or not. So that ranges between $3.75 to $5.75. Current market value, real easy. You just go out there in the street and see what Subway and other competitors are selling it for. You get a range between $7 to $9. And then the key here is the ascribed value. The ascribed value to the purchaser can vary drastically based upon how hungry the purchaser is, or elements such as, is there any other options to the purchaser? And this is how you will see a $10 hot dog at Rexall Place, or whatever our equivalent, is it called Rexall now? Whatever the stadium, the Coliseum is, the sporting event. $10 for a hot dog. How do you get to that? Well, you get to that because they have exclusivity on food service. So the value to the purchaser is assumed to have increased. Here's some pricing rules. As a seller, we always offer at the highest price. As a purchaser, we always want it at the lowest price. And here's the secret to every business. The sale price, what's your business worth? Well, it's going to be the lowest amount the seller will accept and the highest amount the purchaser will give. Never have I seen any amount, any sale that hasn't followed that rule. So let's now go back to our truffle business. I went through that side because it's really important to understand why the truffle business isn't a business and where its value is. So Bob's going to retire. Bob is the chief truffle snorter and sniffer in the business. So what are the input costs? Well, the input cost for the truffles finding is zero because there are no input costs associated with not finding truffles because Bob's on a beach somewhere. What's the value to the seller of these input costs? Zero, because they're not finding any truffles because Bob is in the Mexico somewhere, so there's absolutely no truffles to be made. The value to the purchaser is the value of the number of truffles that his business will produce, which is 0 times whatever the price of a truffle is. Thankfully, I didn't have to look that up because we have no truffles. Current market pricing for 0 truffles is pretty easy, 0. And the value to the purchaser of 0 truffles is 0. So here we had this hobby that was making money of $150,000 a year, but its value as a business is 0. It's because it's not a business. It's a hobby that makes money. So how do we, So your business value will increase with transferability. Bob's Truffles had one person that was capable of finding truffles. That was non-transferable. If Bob wanted to transfer his services to somebody else, that might be feasible, but then he's just becoming an employee with perhaps an exit cost or an exit payment for him not competing. But in the end, it comes down to the transfer of the know-how, your customers, your suppliers, your operations. All of the transferability of those elements are critical to extracting the best price for your business. With every entrepreneur, your business is going to start in your head. But what you need to do is you have to have as a goal to be ready for the sale of your business, getting it out of your head and onto paper. And why is that relevant to today? Why did I go through this? Well, because investment is somebody coming in and buying into your business, which means if you're going to exchange a piece of your business in exchange for investment, you need to know exactly how much of your enterprise or how much your enterprise is worth in order to determine how much to give up for the investment. We're in a post-Dragon's Den world. Everybody understands this concept because we see it on TV once a week, 20 weeks a year. I'm looking for $400,000 for 25% of my company. Oh, okay, so you value your company at 1.6 million. Absolutely. Why is it worth 1.6 million? Well, you go back to the value slides to answer that question and consider how transferable that business is when somebody's coming to invest. So getting investment ready is really all about the paperwork, getting it out of your head and onto a piece of paper. Now, here's a really far too common story. An entrepreneur's meeting with success. They got markets, they've got customers, notoriety, a good product or service. They may even have profit. And either they go looking for it, or just by happy coincidence, somebody comes and says, I would like to invest in your business. Now, investment in your business does not mean that it is going to be somebody buying shares in your company for dollars. Investment in your business can come from bank financing, from private lending, from joint ventures. Somebody says, I'd like to work with you in some way. Somebody comes and says they want to expand your market into different geographies, or even credit lines with major suppliers. These are all the kind of investors or stakeholders that are going to be looking and wanting to understand what's your business worth. And if your business isn't on paper, isn't transferable, then your business value drops. So you've got this opportunity, you're sitting in at a coffee shop, you strike up a conversation, somebody says, I'd like to make an investment. And the next question they tend to ask is, when can I access your data room? And most entrepreneurs who haven't had this happen go, my data what room? Well, what's a data room? Well, most investors are looking for a data room. They might refer to it as a diligence room. Nowadays, it used to be diligence binders. Now it's a diligence folder since it's stored on the cloud. This is really a one-stop shop for anybody who wants to understand what your business is. This is a place where they can go and they can see what you've transferred out of your head onto paper. Your policies, your procedures, your controls, the way that you do business, it's all located in this data room. It is where somebody who can come in and after they leave, they'll know what your financial position is. They'll know what your assets is, what your business is. They'll know about your operations. They may even know all of your customers. Clearly, this is not something that you should show to just people off the streets. But if somebody is willing to write you a check for a piece of your business, it is reasonable for them to understand who it is your customers are and how you do make your money, how you do make money. If you're going to be preparing your data room, and you've been operating for a long period of time, this can be just an absolutely massive undertaking. We're talking weeks or months of activity for multiple people. Think about what you did last week. Think about writing down everything that you did last week today. Now compare that to operating a business for multiple years and then tracking down the paperwork for everything that your business has been doing for 3 years. Putting that in paper, getting it out of your head, showing your work, if you will, when it comes to, for example, supply agreements for your suppliers, or customer agreements, purchase orders, your financials, the paperwork behind why it is that you said you made X dollars last year. Can be absolutely massive in hindsight, but it's actually quite easy. We're talking seconds of your time if you start the process early. If you start it from day one of just every time that you sign a contract, it goes into your data room, into your diligence folder. It goes into a folder that's marked for the type of contract that it is. Those seconds of time can be the salvation of the company later on down the line, because you're ready. You're always investor ready, because everything that your company is doing, you've got in your folders. Now, what do those folders look like? Well, generally a data room looks like this. You got a minute book, you've got your business operations directory, you have an assets directory, you have an IP agreement directory, you have your financials directory, and then you have a market-specific directory, something that's particular for you. For example, if you're a software company, you might have a directory for your source code or your libraries or your copyrightable assets because there's logos or pictures that you've created specific for your business. Many times a single piece of paper can go into multiple folders. There is never any shame to putting it multiple places because all you're doing is expanding how good you look. Now, not to worry, I'm actually going to go through each one of these just on an exemplary matter here, but let's start with the minute book. So a company in their minute book, if you're not a company, then you don't need a minute book. But if you're not a company, then what are you actually selling? Or it makes it a little more complex of how you sell your business. It also makes it a little more complex for how you would receive investment into your business. If you're a sole proprietor and somebody says, I want 30% of your business, what does that look like if you're an individual? Well, the answer is it looks like a piece of paper in a contract that says, I promise to pay you 30% of everything I make or 30% of the profit I make. Much easier for a corporation. There's also some tax benefits, but that's a whole different side or a whole different discussion and presentation that I give. But a company has a minute book. That minute book has to reside at one of the 3 key addresses for a company. So when you incorporate in Alberta, they ask you for 3 different addresses at the registry office. They're going to ask you for a records office. That's where your minute book is kept. They're going to ask you for a registered office. That's where you can, where somebody can come and serve certain legal documents on. And then there's this thing now that's happened in Alberta recently called an agent for service. And that's an address where an agent with an individual and an address that individual can be located at that can be served legal documents. So for example, if your company is being sued. So these 3 addresses have to be provided to the corporate registry when you create your company. And the key thing is that minute book here. That minute book is not really it doesn't have to be a book. We often at law firms and accountants keep them in binders, but in reality, a minute book is just a place where certain key documents required by law have to be kept. Even if you have one shareholder and director, you have to have these key documents, and you would refer to them as being located in the minute book. Those key documents have to be at the records office. By law, anybody on the street can show up at the records office address and demand to see certain documents relating to your corporation. What documents they can request depends on who they are to the company. Guy off the street can only ask for, I think, 3 different types of documents. A shareholder can ask for up to 7 different types of documents. But the fact is that if you don't have those documents at that records office, then there is fines under the Business Corporation Act for you to have it. So, I'll address that later. So the minute book really tells the corporate law story of your company. It tells somebody when it was created, what the shareholders of those company are, and it really outlines the key decisions made by the directors of the company that are documented within it. What are the kind of key decisions that should be in your minute book? Where you buy your boxes is not a key decision to the creation and continued legal existence of the company. But where you opened your bank accounts that's a key decision. When you issue shares to a company, that's a key decision. Who the directors are, these are key decisions. These are things that should be kept in your minute book. There are general standards as to what goes into a minute book and what doesn't. Look to the accountants or lawyers in your life to tell you what should I put in my minute book and what shouldn't I. Don't mistake me as saying that a minute book will ever turn into a reason for somebody to invest in you. That will not, it's not the case. But it is a reason that many investors say no. This gives them a reason to walk away and say, you know what, I'm not really sure if you actually have good corporate standing. I'm not really sure if you have a grasp of your corporation's existence. Therefore, I don't know if I really want to invest in you in the way that I did. And it's not just people buying shares in your company. One of the things that's quite common now is grant agencies. The first thing they do is they check to see if your annual corporate returns are filed. They might even ask for a copy of your articles of incorporation now. I don't know why they do this, but they do. So if you're going to create a company, make sure it looks good. Make sure it looks good. Now, it's not hard. I'm not pretending that you have to go and hire a lawyer to do this. Most registry offices will have a turnstile where they sell a legal will kit, which I've never had an issue with them, and they will have a minute book kit. That minute book kit will contain all the documents that you need for your company. If you don't want to go to a lawyer, don't want to go to an accountant, then buy one of these kits. Make sure that all the documents are filled out and they have good explanations of what you're doing and why. There's some really good online incorporation services now that are out there. I'm not going to say any of the names of them because I can't remember any of them, but they're out there. They generate the documents for you. They maintain your share registries. They can't provide you an address, though. That means that your records address, your registered address, and your address for service might very well be your house. It might be your apartment where you live. This might not be a good thing for you. You may not want people who do a corporate search to find out where you live. In the minute book kits and the online incorporation services can't help you there, but there are lawyers or accountants who can. They'll act as your address. So your minute book, piece it together, put it together. It's actually the easiest thing to do retroactively out of all of this, because the minute book contains certain things that are required and prescribed by law, and it's pretty easy to build that and put it together. But before somebody comes and invests in you, make sure that you do, and you are a corporation. If somebody's going to come and invest and you are a corporation, make sure that your minute book looks clean. Get it cleaned up. Make sure it's in order. Make sure that the addresses, for example, that you have with corporate registries are actually where you currently reside. If you're using your home, that could be a common issue. The next folder, business operations. This is where everything having to do with your business gets dropped in. And depending on what your business is, depends on what's going to be in there. But you're going to have things like a business license, which in the city of Edmonton, if you're operating a business in Edmonton, you're supposed to maintain a business license. Do not mistake me as saying this is anything other than just another tax that the city provides on you. It's a pure taxation regime, but oftentimes you will be asked if somebody is coming and investing in your company, do you have a business license? So you want to keep a copy of that. If you've borrowed money, if you've lent money out, then it goes into your business operations. If you have commercial software that you're using to operate and carry on the business, maybe you put that here too. It might fall into an IP directory as well. I always look at it as saying your Microsoft Office subscription through Office 365, that's probably an operations matter. The software that you created or the specialized software that you license from a third party to conduct your business, well, maybe that's an IP agreement. Or when in doubt, put it everywhere. Put it in many places. You're going to have your employment agreements. You're going to have consulting agreements if you've got consultants that are providing services for you. You might even include your logins for social media, your logins for maintaining all your web domains if you've got an online presence, your SSL certificates if you're maintaining an online secure presence. All of these things go in your business operations directory. Really easy to do when you're building your business. It's quite an exercise to do when your business has been up and running and you go, hey, where's the receipt for Microsoft Word that we purchased 3 years ago from Best Buy? And more importantly, where's the license that came with it? Next, assets. What the assets of your company are can vary, again, depending on what your operations and what your company does. In the end, what you want to be looking at is if this is something that you paid money for or you paid in some way to acquire that you use to conduct your business, it's probably an asset. So here might be non-disclosure agreements. Somebody promising not to disclose something that you've shared with them can be viewed as an asset. It goes in there. Agreements relating to the shareholdings of the company, that goes in there. That's a unanimous shareholders agreement. Usually what I'm looking for, if I'm going to put a USA in the asset, it's when you're holding shares in another company as an asset, not necessarily a company. If your own company has created a shareholders agreement, that goes back into the previous business license. In the end, If you've got it somewhere in your diligence room, pat yourself on the back. It doesn't really matter where you've put it as long as there's some logic to what you're doing. Your social media might be in here as well. If you consider that to be part of your assets, your domain registrations, licenses, real property leases. If you have an operation and you were leasing your property for a storefront, for example, or if you're leasing property as a warehouse, that should be in here somewhere too. The thing I like to encourage my clients to do is to go through, close their eyes and imagine what they do in a day for their business. Oh, I show up at the shop. What shop? Or storefront. Okay, what are the documents surrounding that storefront? What's that storefront going to have? Well, it's going to have a lease. Good. And then what do? You unlock the door? Well, I disarm the security system first. Okay, there you go. You're getting a security alarm company agreement. Run through your day and think about all the documents that capture the processes that you do to be able to sell your wares or to sell your services. That should be going in your diligence directory. Financial matters. This is pretty simple. Financial statements, annual financials, monthly trial balances. If people are running through QuickBooks, QuickBooks will generate a trial balance for you on a monthly basis. Print it, export it, put it into a directory. When somebody comes in and you say, I made $107,000 profit last year, and they go, okay, let me see your diligence room, and they see every month a trial balance that was printed out by QuickBooks showing that you've accrued this much money, you've spent this much money, that just blows away investors. That is the documentation that proves that maybe you did actually make $107,000 a year. Credit card statements. If you can get a credit card for your business, just for your business, your credit card statements can really simplify the way that you track your expenditures. It can be pointed back to say, oh, I remember when I got that license for that asset that we use on our website. And you can go back to the credit card statement and show that you actually paid for that 3 years before because you've got your credit card statements there. The last thing you want to do is to be putting your personal credit cards in there. One of the things that I've seen clients do is that they don't get business cards. They don't get a card for their business, but they have a credit card that they only use for business. Perfectly fine too. Dump that credit card statement every month into a directory, particularly after you've reconciled it and with your QuickBooks and paid everything to yourself or against the card that needs to be done. Your tax filings go in there, your GST remittances, payroll remittances, all of that goes into the financial directories, all of which we get and we do as a business that has operations. And it is so much easier to do it at the end of the process, or I'm sorry, at the end of the day, or at the end of you actually executing some activity. Oh, I finished reconciling the books. I'm going to take 3 seconds more to save that into the directory. I'm going to take 15 seconds to create a directory that actually says the month and the year that is in there. Saves you so much time compared to later on down the line. And that is where I peter out on my long diatribe, where we touched on business valuation. Why did I talk about value? Just to to circle it around, because the value of your business is all based upon how transferable what you do is. And the transferability is really tied to how much you document. The next thing you want to be looking at is, okay, if I've got it documented, how do I put it into some sort of rational organization for somebody to come and look at later on down the line? And that is best done the moment that you do everything that you do. Take that extra 15 seconds to dump it into a directory. And with that, I will stop sharing and see if there's any questions.
There was a question about the minute book. Can it be virtual?
Under the Canada Business Corporations Act, virtual minute books are contemplated and considered. There's actually a section under the federal law that says a minute book can be virtual, and if somebody presents themselves at the records office requesting a document, then you can provide it to them by printing it or giving them an electronic copy. The Alberta Business Corporations Act is silent on it. That said, as long as you I've never heard of anybody complaining because there's no physical copy of the minute book. Just make sure you've got them. There are good online incorporation entities that will create these virtual books. They will keep the documents for you so long as you maintain your subscription. They will provide you copies that you can put into a directory. Probably perfect and fine enough, even if it's not explicitly contemplated under Alberta law, probably good enough. Yes, so I'm okay with the idea with a virtual minute book. Just make sure that what you've got in your virtual minute book is what's supposed to be there.
And then there's a question about which provinces do you work out of?
Do I work out of? Oh, primarily Alberta. I do have clients that are scattered all across Canada. If you're looking, I would avoid British Columbia. British Columbia is weird. It's just weird. There's weird things in their corporate law. They've got a weird way that they deal with litigation. It sometimes feels like you're in a completely different country if you're operating in British Columbia. But while Ontario was perfectly, it feels natural, and Ontario and Saskatchewan feels just like Alberta. But BC is weird. So, not just legally too. Okay. Well, thank you, Nikolai.
Yes, and there was a question from Peter. Do you need it to incorporate before you can get a business credit card?
No. And my sigh is because I am not a big fan of banks. Banks do a lot of harm. And so oftentimes people will go through great efforts to be able to create a company, create a corporation, have that corporation open a bank account, acquire sufficient experience with the bank to go off and get a credit card, and then they get a corporate credit card. What they don't realize is when they sign up for that corporate credit card, they are personally guaranteeing and maybe even having their own personal accounts attached to that credit card. So a lot of people, I've had clients who go through and expend significant effort to be able to get that corporate card, when in reality, it's just a personal card with a different name on the front. So I'm not a fan of credit cards. Don't mistake me as saying credit cards are things that you should be doing. If you are going to have a credit card, then you should be paying that balance off at the end of every month. Don't borrow via a credit card. But they are incredibly useful tools for documenting and categorizing your expenses. Everybody's credit card, they automatically do it for you. It's a great way to keep track of what you're spending on your business and to further support the fact that you did things that you can't remember doing or you can't find the documentation for. Do you own your own domain? Yeah, I own my own domain, but I can't seem to figure out who I registered with. Oh, here it is, GoDaddy. Conveniently, GoDaddy bills me every month to remind me that I'm using them for my hosting services. Credit cards can be very handy that way.
Awesome. Are there any other questions?
Well, good. Feel free to bounce any questions that come to mind through your Mauji Center. They'll eventually make their way to me. Happy to answer them.
Awesome.
If there's any takeaway here, start documenting what you're doing now, not later. And there is no better feeling. I work with a number of companies, both in operational and legal context. There is no better feeling than getting a call from the CEO and saying, we have an investor who wants to see our diligence room. How long would it take for you to get it ready? And to say, I need their email address in 15 seconds. That's a good feeling. Versus the first time with that company in particular, they said, hey, we've got investors. How long until we've got a diligence room ready? And I said 3 weeks minimum. And we're hiring a team of 7 people to do it, which turned out just to be a team of 4. But that was not a good feeling, but that's very common when you're talking about companies that have been operating for a while. A real good feeling when you get to say the 15 seconds.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Craig. Oh, is there somebody just going to ask a question? Nope. Okay, I appreciate you taking time, especially if you're not feeling 100%. Hope you feel better soon. And students, if you have any questions, fire them my way and we'll make sure you get connected.
Yeah, this illness is making me look old and a little fat. I don't know. Must be
Yeah,
some
you
virus
should
that's
look
going on.
bad.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Can I get your name? Hi. Let's go. Okay, gotcha. Awesome. Thank you.
How is it, Craig? It's easy going.
Always, so he always puts like